You awaken beneath the slanted wooden beams of a Viking longhouse, your breath rising faintly into the warm, smoky air. The scent of burnt pine and animal hide lingers from the hearth that still glows with the red-orange memories of last nights. Fire around you, fur-covered benches and intricately carved wooden pillars cradle the quiet remnants of life. A half-finished wool tunic, a stone bowl of stale barley gruel, a polished horn tucked beside a sleeping hound. You sit up slowly, the thick furs sliding off your shoulders, and listen to the soft murmurs of a waking village. Outside, the light creeping through the smoke hole above signals a weak northern dawn. Inside, however, the longhouse remains its own world, a timbered cocoon where time thickens. You feel its weight in the soot-blackened rafters. In the worn plank floor, there has endured the footsteps of warlords, blacksmiths, and weavers alike. The longhouse is not just a home. It is the center of Viking life, politics, and myth. Here, alliances are forged not just with handshakes, but with shared meals and whispered oaths beside the fire. You wander toward the central hearth, noticing how the space is arranged with deliberate symbolism. The high seat of the chieftain sits just behind the fire, flanked by honor guard benches. Shields hang like trophies from the beams, each dent a forgotten skirmish. The chieftain isn't here yet, but the thick carved chair radiates presence. As you run your fingers over the dragon head etching on its armrest, you feel history breathing back at you. A young thrall shuffles past carrying kindling. A moment later, the longhouse door creaks open and cold air gusts in. Two figures enter, an older warrior with a fur-lined cloak and a young woman with a linen hood pulled low. They speak softly but urgently. Something is stirring. Perhaps a feast, perhaps a reckoning. You tuck your hands into your sleeves and step aside as they pass, already knowing nothing here is ever merely domestic. The doors of the longhouse creak open with the low groan of old timber, and you step into a space thick with the scent of smoke, pine resin, and the faintest trace of roasted meat long since eaten. Inside, the hearth burns low at this early hour, but its embers cast a warm glow across the packed earth floor and illuminate the great wooden beams above your head. These beams, carved with simple yet deliberate markings, twisting vines, knotted animals, and runes whose meanings shift depending on who reads them, hold the longhouse like ribs on a mighty beast. Your footsteps crunch softly over strewn reeds, laid fresh that morning, and the warmth of the fire draws you forward. Around the hearth are the trappings of daily life, iron tools polished to gleam like obsidian. Worn wooden bowls stacked beside a trough of melting snow, and scraps of wool left from the previous night's spinning. You pause before the high seat at the far end of the hollow-carved wooden throne draped in wolf pelts, its armrests worn smooth by generations of hands. This was the seat of the chieftain, a role both feared and revered. Here, disputes were settled in whispers or shouts, depending on the mood of the gathered kinfolk. Tales tell of decisions made in this very spot that sparked raids, marriages, or even quiet assassinations by poison slipped into honeyed mead. You almost feel the ghosts of those moments, watching from the corners, still listening to see if you Understand the weight this place carried. Overhead, smoke curls upward and filters through a smoke hole in the thatched roof. There are no windows, only small slits in the walls, and they let in little more than pale ribbons of daylight. The light catches on the bronze brooches adorning a cloak laid across a bench, and you imagine the woman who might have worn it perhaps. The chieftain's wife, or a visiting noblewoman, her status marked by the gleam of her jewelry and the firmness of her voice. Nearby, a young thrall sweeps ashes into a clay dish, working quickly and quietly. She does not look up as you pass, but her presence is another thread in this living tapestry. In these long houses, every person had a place, from the smallest child nestled in fur-lined alcoves to the oldest skald, reciting legends by firelight. Warming thin fingers around a carved cup, you continue along the length of the hall, and the walls seem to whisper stories to you. Here, a trader once bartered amber for a bowstring strung with elk sinew. There, two warriors measured their strength with oaths and clenched fists, before setting out for distant shores. And just beyond the far post, a lover's token lies hidden. Under the floorboards a charm carved from whalebone, a promise never fulfilled. The longhouse is not silent. Its timbers groan, the fire crackles softly, and somewhere, tucked behind a thick curtain of woven wool, someone snores. This hall is alive in the way only places steeped in memory can be. It is a witness, a participant, and a storyteller, all at one start as you settle onto a bench and lean back against the wall. The warmth of the hearth begins to sink into your bones. You feel the pull of centuries and understand, for a moment, why the Norse held their long houses so dear. They were not merely shelters from the cold, they were stages upon which the everyday became epic, and where even the humblest act, like mending a tunic or handing down a tale, became part of something enduring. Asterisk, you linger by the longhouse walls, tracing your fingers across the rough grain of the timber. The wood is dark with age, worn smooth where generations of shoulders have brushed past it. 1,000 stories have soaked into these walls' births, deaths, betrayals whispered in the dark. Every log was once hand-hewn from the forests that line the fjords, felled with care and chosen not just for strength, but for spirit. The Norse believed trees held memory, and it seems this house remembers everything. The air within still smells faintly of smoke and salt. Beneath the roof, blackened, beams stretch like ribs overhead, curving in a protective arc. It's easy to imagine the nights spent here, curled beneath thick furs as the wind howled outside. Children would have fallen asleep to the soft drone of elders recounting the sagas. These were not merely tales for entertainment, they were living histories, bound with blood and honor. Tonight, you're not alone. Through the gloom you see others gathered around the hearth, not just flesh and blood companions, but ghosts of memory. A bearded elder murmurs a verse from the Havamel. A shield maiden, her braids crisp with frost, sits sharpening her blade. A boy leans in, eyes wide, hanging on every word as a Skald spins tales of sea serpents and thunder gods. You take your place beside them, unbidden but welcome, drawn into their timeless vigil. There is a certain reverence in the silence here. No one speaks over the Skald. Even the crackle of the fire seems to hush itself in deference. These walls were not built solely for warmth or shelter. They were forged for memory, for counsel, for conflict to be resolved and alliances forged. One could argue that in these halls, kingdoms rose and fell not by the blade, but by the whispered word. A sudden gust winds against the shuttered slats, and the fire flutters. You feel the draught snake along the floor, and draw your cloak tighter. Someone stands, walks to the far end of the hall, and places a carved wooden token in a niche. You wonder what vow it seals. Perhaps an oath of vengeance, perhaps a promise of peace. These were homes. Yes, but they were altars, too. You let your eyes wander upward again. Hanging from one of the beams is a length of braided rope, decorated with bits of bone and dyed cloth. A token of good fortune, maybe, or a warning. Superstition and belief blur in places like this. What matters is not the origin of the object, but the intention with which it was placed. You imagine the woman who hung it there, hands chapped from seawater, lips cracked with winter wind. She might have whispered a name as she tied the last knot. And suddenly, the longhouse doesn't feel so empty. Asterisk, asterisk. The hearth is glowing low now. The embers no longer roaring with heat, but pulsing in soft waves of orange and red. You sit a little closer, drawn to the flicker. It's not just warmth it gives, it's a kind of memory, stored in ash and flame. Across from you sits an old skald, a storyteller whose voice is worn from winters, not shouting. He doesn't speak loudly, but when he begins, the hall quiets. Children nudge closer. Warriors stop sharpening blades. Even the hounds stir and then settle. He begins with a tale of a past feast, one that ended with an oath, a duel, and an unexpected marriage. The details shift each time he tells it. Like the patterns in the northern lights, but no one minds. The stories are not just records. They are rituals in a Viking longhouse. Oral tradition is the library. There are no scrolls. No books, only memory passed from mouth to ear, from grandmother to granddaughter. Historians still argue whether some of these tales were embroidered for drama. But here, inside the walls of timber and smoke, no one questions the skald. His word is enough. You shift on your bench. Behind the skald, shields are mounted along the walls. Each bears the mark of a family, some fading, some freshly painted. They're not just decorations. Each is a declaration. We are here. We have a seat at this fire, a seat in this story. Tonight's gathering is peaceful, but you've seen tense nights before. One wrong toast, one ill-timed insult, and the longhouse becomes a courtroom or a battlefield. You remember a night 2 winters ago when 2 cousins argued over inheritance. By dawn, only one remained, and yet the fire still burned. You wonder how many secrets the smoke has carried out through the smoke hole above. Whispers, laughter, moans, last words. If only the beams overhead could speak. If only the carved dragon posts, each with eyes like coiled storms, could tell what they've seen. Outside, the wind picks up again. The thatch rustles, and a few flakes of snow slip through the cracks. A child is pulled close by their mother's arm. The father lifts a ladle of stew from the iron cauldron and fills a carved wooden bowl, steam curling into the firelight. The Skalds' voice continues, now telling of Odin's bargain with Mimir, of wisdom bought at the price of an eye. Somewhere near the back, two brothers murmur over a map. It's nothing more than a scrap of leather, charcoal lines marking the way to a distant fjord where a rival clan was last seen. They speak low, but you can hear the edge in their voices. Plans are always being made, even in peace, especially. In peace, you sip from a horn of mead. It's sweet and sharp, and it warms your throat. A woman beside you, wrapped in wool, begins weaving, her fingers dancing over threads like she's pulling spells from the air. Her spindle hums softly, a counter-rhythm to the Skalds' words. The fire crackles again. Ash shifts. The longhouse breathes. It is a house of wood and bone and heat. But more than that, it is alive. And you are inside it. The hour grows later. But the longhouse does not sleep all at once. It is a layered hush, some resting, some stirring, all folded beneath the timber roof like thoughts inside a dreaming head. You glance toward the raised platform where the chieftain sits. Not a throne, just a broad bench with carved wolf heads at each end, and a bearskin draped over the back. He does not sit tall now, but leans slightly forward, elbows on his knees, listening. His eyes are heavy-lidded, his beard streaked with silver. He has ruled for 3 decades, but tonight he is simply part of the fire's glow. His wife, once a fierce negotiator from a southern clan, sits beside him, grinding herbs between her palms, scenting the air with lavender and smoked pine. Behind them, the house's structure creaks softly. Vikings did not use nails. The timbers are joined with wooden pegs and clever notches. The whole house like a great ship turned upside down. Some say this design comes from ancient seafarers who imagined the longhouse as a grounded vessel, carrying its family through winters like a ship through storm. At the far end, 2 girls sit near a hound so old his whiskers are white. One whispers, "A riddle." The other guesses wrong. They both laugh, but gently, so as not to disturb the sleeping baby nearby, wrapped tightly and slung beside a low beam. Its mother dozes with one arm curled around the child and her back against the wall. You imagine her dreaming not of battles, but of warm soil and summer barley. Midwinter feasts are approaching, and the household is preparing. You can see the jars of dried berries hanging in bundles. Overhead, smoked meat wrapped in flax cloths, and carved wooden figures of gods tucked among the rafters. Small forehammers dangle from leather thongs, guardians against hunger and misfortune. You recall hearing an old tale once how Odin walked the earth disguised as a wanderer and stayed in a longhouse like this. He listened to gossip, judged the strength of the people, and blessed only those who welcomed strangers with an open bench and a hot bowl of stew. Hospitality was a virtue as sacred as vengeance. Tonight, no vengeance brews, at least not openly. But beneath the pleasant haze of firelight and mead, there are always tensions. The blacksmith's son is glaring again at the new fisherman, who came down from the fjords last spring. No one speaks of it, but you remember a lost net, a snapped spear, and a debt unpaid. These things simmer, and longhouses know how to hold them quiet. Slow burning like coals waiting for the right gust of wind. The Skald is asleep now, slumped against a wooden post, his mouth open just enough to let out a breathy snore. His story ended, not with a grand finale, but with a quiet sigh like all good stories do when they're told for sleep. His words still drift in your ears, like smoke winding through thatch. The gods walk with us, but speak only through dreams. Outside, the night deepens, the wind drops, and snow falls in heavier flakes now, tapping gently on the turf roof. Inside, someone begins humming a lullaby in the old tongue, a melody so ancient that no one remembers all the words, only the hum. You feel yourself rocking slightly in rhythm, not from movement, but from memory. The memory of waves, of oars, of northern wind and wolf fur cloaks, and mothers who sang lullabies against the dark. You stretch your legs a little. Your bench is hard, but there is comfort in its firmness. It holds you, like the longhouse holds. Or, you think, not for the first time, how many generations have sat right here, argued, wept, kissed, plotted, sung, slept. This isn't just shelter. It's continuity, timber and torchlight, and time itself woven together like threads on a loom. You close your eyes, letting the mead settle warm in your belly, letting the hum of the longhouse become your breath. Somewhere, not far off, a fox barks once in the dark. Inside, everything is still. Asterisk, asterisk. The hearth fire crackles in its slow, steady rhythm, no longer blazing, but glowing with thick orange embers like the final breaths of a sunken day. Around it, the longhouse dreams. Not just the people, but the house itself seems to breathe. Now wooden beams expanding and settling with each passing hour, as if it too is listening, watching, remembering. You adjust your position slightly on the carved bench, pressing your palm to the fur lining beside you. It's warm, worn soft by years of hands and stories. Across the hall, two elders speak in hushed tones. Not gossip, no. Their conversation is slower than that, almost reverent. One of them, wrinkled and squinting, tells the other of a dream he had last night. In it, he stood beside a fjord so still he could see the face of Thor reflected in the water. The other chuckles, but not cruelly. That was no dream, he says. You were remembering your first raid. Remember how you trembled when the oarsmen sang to the shore. Raids. Not the clashing swords and burning villages you imagine from the Sagas, but the tense, stomach-tight nights beforehand. The food packed, the prayers whispered, the looks exchanged between brothers. In the longhouse, those memories live side by side with quiet domestic ones. This is the paradox of Viking life. Brutality and tenderness stitched into the same fabric. Near the support pillar, a young boy carves a strip of driftwood with a dull knife, his brow furrowed. His sister watches from a distance, waiting her turn. She already knows she'll make something better. She always does. Their mother, once a warrior herself in youth, now weaves wool near the fire, her hands swift and certain. The pattern is a variant of a protective sigil passed down from her own grandmother. Each thread, each twist, carries a fragment of history, of memory, of belief. You trace your eyes along the curved ribs of the roof like the belly of a whale. You think. A great beast of a house, sheltering its pod through storm and winter. The old ones say the longhouse remembers every word ever spoken inside it. That when you're gone, the wood still murmurs your name when the wind pushes through the cracks. A low clink breaks the silence. A man is polishing his axe in the corner, its head laid respectfully on a folded cloth. Not because he plans to fight, but because it belonged to his father, and his father before him. He says nothing, but the action is a kind of prayer, sharpening history, honoring ghosts. The longhouse absorbs it all. Words, silence, laughter, weeping. It holds the sagas that were never written down, the glances exchanged over feasts, the little betrayals and the quiet loyalties. Each floorboard, each post, each beam has soaked in centuries. If you lean in close, press your ear to the grain. Perhaps you'd hear it whisper something only the dead remember. Outside, the wind has shifted. Snow swirls sideways now, brushing against the sod walls with soft, hissing sighs. One of the hounds by the door stirs and whines faintly in his sleep. A badger's tracks were spotted earlier in the day near the grain shed. The animal's restlessness is a warning. Storms approach, but here, within the longhouse, you are shielded by timber and turf, by fire and flesh, by the silent agreement of those within these walls to hold space for each other through rivalry and joy. In sickness and celebration, you feel this pact like a second skin. You look again at the hearth. A young woman now takes her place near it, her long braids woven with small amber beads. She's kneading dough, humming to herself. The flour dust rises and drifts in the firelight like spirits, soft and glowing. She's making the dense bread that will be served at sunrise, should the snow let up. You breathe deeply. The smoke doesn't sting, it's part of the air now. Earthy, thick, and full of memory. You close your eyes again, letting the warmth of the embers guide your thoughts. Not forward, but inward, backward, to other fires, other nights, other long houses. You imagine the years stacking one upon the other like slabs of peat, rich with stories and silence alike. This night will pass, as they all do, but the house will remember it, and maybe you will to **** by now. The longhouse hums with a rhythm, not of speech, but of presence. You don't notice when conversation has faded only that it has been replaced by the gentle rustle of wool blankets, the creak of timber, and the deep, slow breathing of dozens asleep under the same roof. You lie still for a moment, staring upward. The thick smoke from the hearth no longer climbs in a column. It pools slightly beneath the thatched roof, forming a lazy cloud that swirls faintly with every gust of wind that leaks through the wall. Joints, no one minds the smoke. It protects against the biting cold and the insects of warmer months. Even the gods, it is said, follow the smoke skyward to find the prayers tucked within it. Behind you, someone sighs in their sleep. You think it's the boy who was carving earlier. In his dreams, perhaps he's aboard his first Nah. The open sea wind in his face, his blade now a worthy weapon. Or maybe he's simply imagining the feast table he saw his uncle build last. Harvest he had whispered to his sister that he wanted to build one even bigger. The longhouse at night becomes its own kind of dream. The central fire fades low. Now just a heart glowing beneath ash. Shadows gather between the pillars, cloaking the benches and hides. In that twilight space, memory plays freely. You see not just the people around you, but the echoes of those who once sat where you sit. They are not ghosts their kin dot above the fire pit. Hanging from a crossbeam is a bundle of dried herbs, thyme, yarrow, angelica. Their scent is faint, but familiar, grounding. They were gathered in the short summer and hung to dry where their magic wouldn't be disturbed. Healing plants, memory plants. Some say they help the soul find its way back after a dream, should it get lost in the dark. Near the far wall, an elder stirs in her sleep. Her name is Thora, and the village still murmurs that she once guided an entire raiding party home after their ship was blown off course. She had read the stars, listened to the wind, and dreamed of the coastline. No one argued with her anymore, not since that journey. Even now, wrapped in a thick burskin, she seems formidable. Her presence anchors the room. You remember the stories told at supper how the longhouse was once smaller, simpler, built by hand from drift logs and sod, patched with moss and horsehair to keep out the wind. The roof once leaked, the smoke choked the rafters, and still people gathered here, argued, laughed, saying now it is grander. But not just in size, it's grand in story, because every plank, every patch, every repair holds evidence of someone who loved this place enough to preserve it. You realize that longhouses were never just built, they were earned. Suddenly, a gust of wind pushes through the doorframe. A few sparks leap from the fire pit. A dog barks in its sleep. The people shift, but do not wake. Outside, snow drums on the turf roof like a slow war drum. Inside, the walls hold steady, thick and proud, as they have for generations. You wonder, then, what your place would have been. Would you be the speaker, the one who stood at the center and called the feast to order? Would you be the hunter, returning with game on your shoulders, your boots soaked with ice water? Or perhaps the weaver, whose fingers knew how to bind fate into cloth? A baby cries briefly just once before settling again into sleep. The mother doesn't move. She knows the longhouse holds her child just as surely as her own arms. There's comfort in that, a structure not just of wood and turf, but of trust, ritual, and breath. You shift again, pulling your blanket tighter. A few embers spark and dim. The fire is no longer meant to light the room. It is meant to soothe it. In this house, people understand the language of fire. They read its moods. A high flame means gossip will fly. A low, steady glow like now means peace. Someone has left a carved figure at the base of a pillar. A small wooden horse, smooth from years of handling. Perhaps it's a prayer for protection on a coming journey. Perhaps it's a gift for someone who will not return. The longhouse doesn't judge. It simply holds. You close your eyes. Your breath joins the rhythm of the house, slow, steady, timeless. You imagine the gods watching from the smoke, nodding in approval at the stillness, the silence, the care these people take with each other's dreams. You belong here, for now, and always asterisk asterisk. You wake again not fully, just enough to know that time has passed. The fire is now barely more than a glowing trail in the ashes, and the air is colder. You pull the woolen blanket tighter across your chest and listen. The house doesn't sleep as much as it rests, a subtle difference, but one you understand now. Rest is deeper. It's knowing others are near, that danger is far, and that nothing must be done except breathe. A slow creaking echoes near the beams above. It's the sound of old timber stretching as the temperature drops outside. The house is alive in its own way, breathing with its people, shifting with the season. A soft snore from the far side of the hearth, a cough, a whispered dream that never becomes words. You're still wrapped in fur, but you feel the chill of morning trying to push its way through the turf roof. Somewhere beneath your blanket is a small carved token someone gave you, a charm. Perhaps a smooth riverstone tied with flax. They said it would help with dreams, though you weren't sure what kind. The dreams you've had in this place have felt older than you, echoes, not stories. Someone moves across the floor now. Their steps are slow, deliberate, trying not to wake anyone. You hear the shuffle of soft leather soles and the faint slosh of a water skin. A woman, likely one of the younger wives, making her way toward the coals to stir the fire. There's a rhythm to her movement, like she's done it hundreds of times. She drops to a crouch and pulls a handful of straw from a hanging bundle. You watch as the red glow becomes orange, then gold. The straw catches, and with it, so does the promise of another day. Above the hearth hangs a metal cauldron, blackened with soot. It will be filled with porridge soon, barley or oats, perhaps, stretched with dried berries and goat's milk. Simple, but nourishing. The sort of meal meant to keep your hands warm while chopping wood, or bracing the wind on a boat. As the light grows stronger, the longhouse stirs. A cough becomes a voice becomes the greeting. Someone sneezes, someone mutters thanks to Thor or Freya. A child complains softly about the cold. An older man, his voice rough with years, says something about frost and fish nets, and is answered with low laughter. The smell of smoke has changed. No longer the smolder of last night's pine, but the sharp note of new kindling. It stings the nose, wakes the blood. Life in the longhouse begins again, not with fanfare, but with warmth. You sit up slowly, your muscles protest. The floor is hard, even with the straw mat, but the ache feels earned, like a badge of your place here. You wrap the blanket around your shoulders and scan the walls again. Morning light now touches the carved beams, revealing not just figures and runes, but fingerprints. Smudges where hands have traced symbols for years. Marks where children once climbed and were scolded with fondness. In the far end of the house, a woman is brushing her daughter's hair with a bone comb. The girl winces, but doesn't pull away. Her mother hums a melody, likely older than her grandmother, and the notes seem to hang in the rising warmth like threads of memory. Another man begins to clean his tools. You recognize the craftsman's apron from the night before, the one who repaired a broken knife while everyone else ate. His hands are large, but move with care. He dips a cloth into melted snow and wipes down the handle of an axe. It's not battle ready, it's firewood ready. But here, that's its own kind of warfare. You wonder how many of these people were born beneath this same roof. How many first breaths were taken right where the coals now crackle? How many last ones, too? And how many stories have been whispered into these shadows and held quietly, without judgment, by the very bones of this place? You feel safe, not because it is soft, but because it is known, predictable, honored. Every act here, even the smallest combing hair, stirring porridge, oiling leather is done with intention. That's the difference between surviving and living. Now, outside, the light has turned winter blue. The door opens and closes quickly. A young man steps in, brushing frost from his beard. He stomps his feet twice, slaps his arms to shake off the cold, and grins. "Snow's light," he says. "Good day for fish traps." Someone groans in mock protest. Every day's a good day for fish traps, according to you. Laughter follows. It rises, briefly, like smoke, but does not break. The peace, it folds back into the walls, into the air, into the story. You rise, stretch, and step quietly toward the hearth. The fire is full now. So is the longhouse. And so are you. Asterisk by midday, the longhouse hums with quiet industry. The space transforms. With the sun, no longer the sleepy cavern of coals and whispers, but now a workshop, a council chamber, and a gathering place for the day's ambitions. You sit near the hearth, a cup of warmed goat's milk cradled in your hands, watching how the room arranges itself without instruction. A young girl sweeps the floor with bundled reeds. Her strokes are swift, methodical, and she glances up now and again at her elders as though hoping to be noticed, praised for her part in keeping the hearth sacred. Behind her, the craft table becomes a hive of focus. To women work on weaving narrow belts from dyed wool, their hands looping thread with a rhythm older than any of their songs. The belts aren't merely for function. These carry meaning encoded. Patterns of clan lineage, woven love notes, symbols of luck or remembrance. A third woman brings over-dyed yarn, muttering about the time it took to crush the red root powder into usable pigment. You catch her words. Took longer than weaving. The belt itself, but the red has a story of its own. In a far corner, two brothers argue over a blade. One swears the edge was dulled by poor use. The other says the grindstone is to blame. An older man, possibly their uncle, raises a brow and settles the matter by testing the blade on a strip of fish skin. It's not the edge, he says, with the weariness of one who has seen too many pointless quarrels. It's the hands behind it. Outside, the weather has shifted. You hear the hiss of melting snow dripping from the thatched eaves. A moment later, someone pushes open the door with a grunt, bringing in a gust of bright cold air and the smell of pine resin. He carries a small log bundle and a rabbit tied to his belt. "Not much game today," he announces. But the gods sent something, at least. An elder seated by the fire nods without looking up. Something is better than nothing. The gods reward persistence. From above, the smoke hole lets in a shaft of light, illuminating floating dust motes and painting the air with quiet gold. The firewood is stacked with care, and the rabbit is soon skinned with practiced precision. It will feed at least a few mouths, maybe one of the children, maybe the aging warrior with bad knees who still insists on sitting closest to the door. Out of habit, that warrior is there now, his hair long, streaked with silver, his knuckles wrapped in cloth. He sharpens a small knife slowly, not to use it, but to feel the steel respond. He tells no one the story behind that blade, but you can feel it hum through the silence. The others respect it. They leave the old man to his thoughts. In the central space, a woman has begun to carve runes into a strip of bone. You recognize her from the morning, the one who woke to rekindle the coals. Her hands are steady now, tracing shallow grooves with a stone chisel. Each symbol is careful, measured. Someone asks what she's carving, and she answers softly, a protection stave. For my cousin's journey north, the runes are jagged yet elegant, full of sharp lines and quiet power. You've seen them inlaid into doors, burned into tools, even sewn into cloaks. Some believe they speak directly to the gods. Others say they're just stories etched into silence. Both may be true. The longhouse doors open again, and a familiar sound follows, voices raised in song. A pair of travelers return from the neighboring farmstead, their cheeks flushed red, their arms full of salted cod and barley sacks. One begins to hum an old tune, and it spreads like smoke, casual, meandering, infectious. Soon, the longhouse is a low chorus, not loud, not forced, just enough to ripple the beams and stir the fire's rhythm. Even the old man at the door taps his foot faintly. You think of how this place holds so much at once: joy and grief, pride and exhaustion, wisdom and foolishness. It's not just a building. It's a container for memory, shaped by every story, whispered under its rafters. The air seems thick with voices not currently speaking. As the afternoon fades, shadows lengthen across the walls. Carved beams stretch into soft gold, then charcoal gray. The light slants, catching the edge of a drinking horn, the gleam of an oiled blade, the silver thread in a woven tunic. Soon it will be time to eat, to sit in a circle, to share what little there is, and to let the stories come again. Someone calls to you gently. There's space beside the hearth, a bowl being filled, a spot made ready. You stand. You go. And in that motion, you become part of the story. 2. ****. Night drapes its velvet shawl over the fjord like a slow tide, and once again, the longhouse breathes in unison with the darkness. The fire has been stoked into a steady, glowing cradle of orange. Its heartbeat pulses through the floorboards, through the walls, and into the quiet minds gathered within. You lie on a woven mat near the back wall, head resting on a fur-padded bolster. Around you, the longhouse falls into its rhythm of sleep, gentle coughing, the rustle of shifting cloaks, a soft sigh from someone turning over. Somewhere near the front, a low murmur still carries. An elder is reciting a saga, voice like warm wax dripping from a candle. Only a few remain awake to hear it, and fewer still will remember the tale in full by morning. But that's not the point. The words are less for learning and more for holding space. You listen. The saga wins through brave kings and treacherous winters. through drowned sons and faithful ravens, through women who held blades in the shadows, and husbands who never returned. It's a story that doesn't end, only coils like a serpent, circling back to where it began. The fire pops once loud enough to echo across the beams, and a child stirs in her sleep. A mother hushes her with a slow, calming tone. Outside, wind snakes around the thatched roof, whispering over the wooden slats like an old god passing by without entering. You shift, feeling the mat beneath you, the smell of smoke soaked into the very timbers of this house. Every log here holds a fingerprint. Every creak in the floorboards a memory, some from your time, many from before. Perhaps this house remembers you already, has absorbed your breath, the press of your feet, your silence. In one corner, a dog snores, its legs twitching in a dream. Beside it, a young man clutches a carved pendant to his chest as he sleeps. It's the shape of a horse's head, perhaps Sleipnir, Odin's mount. Or maybe just a family heirloom passed down from some quiet grandfather who once warmed his bones by this very same fire. And what of the women who held this place together? The ones who lit the first flames at dawn, carved the runes on bone, mended the cloaks of warriors, and wept in the shadows. After raids, their presence is here, not loud, but steady. They are the threads in the Longhouses' fabric. Without them, there would be no rhythm, no heartbeat to echo into the future. You wonder how many stories are lost, not because they were never told, but because no one was awake to listen. Maybe this story, this very one you drift within, is a tribute to that, to the quiet lives, the ordinary courage, the patience. The Longhouse, at this hour, is a cathedral of sleep. The beams above you stretch like ribs around a heart. The smoke hole shows a sliver of starlight. And every sleeper here, from babe to elder, is cradled in the same warmth. You think of the politics that once brewed at this hearth of whispered alliances over ale, of knives drawn beneath the table, of grudges buried deeper than root cellars. And yet, tonight, all is still. Even old enemies, if they lie here tonight, lie under the same roof and same gods. The smell of wood smoke and will wraps around you like a blanket. You hear a distant owl, its call muffled by the thick winter air. There is nothing left to worry over now. Not the storm beyond the fjord, not the merchant's delay, not the quarrel by the grindstone in here. It is enough to breathe, to lie still, to belong. And so, your eyes slip closed not because you must, but because the Longhouse has already lulled you. You become one more memory held by its walls, one more breath folded into the night. The fire hums its low lullaby. The wind strokes the roof like a mother's hand, and you sleep.